It's a new year, and already the hype is building for what an incredible year this could be for Nintendo. 2026 in particular has a lot to prove as it's the first full year on the market for a new console, and so I'm sure that when we look back at the end of this year, there will have been some incredible highs. However, my take is a little more nuanced, and my expectations for the first 5 months of the year at least are a little more restrained in the first of a small series of videos delving into different aspects of Nintendo's 2026. I want to look at the pacing of 2026, and while I do think that there will be some very exciting projects revealed, and I think the holiday quarter especially will see some of Switch 2's all-time biggest titles, my suspicion is that the year will feel more like a marathon than a sprint, especially in the early months. Let's break that down, and to do that, we're going to start by understanding how Nintendo sees their 2026 and what their really big turning points are. Their single most public event this year is the second Mario movie. The last movie was a huge deal, which pulled in 168 million viewers at the box office alone, millions more than own an original Switch, and that's before the effect of people having their awareness of Mario raised from seeing advertisements, streaming versions, and toys, let alone the games. They also have, as always, to plan around the 2026 holiday season, in which they need to double down and become far more competitive than they have been so far in order to compete for console sales amongst the tier of customers who didn't leap on the Switch 2 bandwagon early, but who are persuadable. These two represent to me the major sales windows for the company this year. Now, on top of this, there are certain devices that the company can employ. Firstly, we have Anniversaries, which to them I believe is more a sales technique rather than an end in itself. Strictly speaking, Zelda is up first, but I don't anticipate Zelda getting much love until later this year, and possibly not even until September, matching the rhythm of last year with Mario. Now, granted, Mario actually has the anniversary in September, but even so, in previous years, Nintendo has celebrated Zelda's anniversary in September, and I think they may continue to do that this time. I do think Zelda will have a lot going for it as a franchise, but ultimately the purpose of Zelda's 40th this year is going to be the same as the purpose of Mario's 40th in 2025. It's a great way to set out a stall of merchandise and games for the hype wave of the movie the following year. In this kind of situation, they may not want one single star attraction, a huge new game, but plenty of available material that they can sell as new to customers who haven't really been into Zelda previously. I'm not saying there won't be a Zelda game release, as I'm sure there will be, but I'd expect smaller spin-offs or more minor key re-releases, almost certainly not a new mainline game, and probably not any very extensive remake project. Why wouldn't they want Zelda any earlier? Well, firstly, it's the Mario window. They have the film in which they want to push Mario particularly. And secondly, to the extent that anything else gets a look in, it's the Pokemon Company. Pokemon's 40th is in February. It will near certainly have a Pokemon Present show, and they will near certainly reveal Generation 10. Now, the Pokemon Company is part owned by Nintendo, but their priorities are not wholly aligned, and in this case, it does make sense for Nintendo to stay with focusing on Mario this year while seeding Pokemon the floor for the spring, and then Nintendo can double down on Zelda at the end of the year as they begin the hype cycle for the next film. I'd love to say that I expected Metroid to get a significant look in this summer as well, but I don't. Apart from anniversaries, they have major game releases and announcements. This is, of course, the primary lever they have to ramp up the console sales. We'll talk about announcements in a bit, but first let's consider game releases. Here is the first reason that I think we should temper expectations to some degree, specifically because there's a huge amount already sketched in for next year or else widely expected. Now that said, some of the things that are expected but unrevealed may be huge event titles, and I expect that they will be. For example, we fully expect that Pokemon Gen 10 is basically a lock for this winter. I think a major Mario of some description is also pretty much guaranteed for the same period as a follow-up to the movie. This matches pretty well 2018 in terms of Nintendo's priorities. There, in the holiday quarter, they had Smash and Pokemon Let's Go, plus Super Mario Party, which would turn out to be a major hit for them, but I'm not sure they would have expected it to do quite such huge numbers at the time, based on the prior performance of that series. Here's the thing though, Excluding Pokemon, Nintendo generally has one absolutely major, show-stoppingly big AAA title per financial year. Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Animal Crossing New Horizons were all in consecutive financial, if not calendar, years. There were plenty of other titles they hoped would do well, and some really did take off in a major way. Notably Ring Fit Adventure, Luigi's Mansion 3, Splatoon 2, and especially the aforementioned Super Mario Party, but I don't think they were always considered anchor points in the same way as these major AAA titles. Now granted, this hasn't always been the case. Super Mario 3D World, Mario Kart 8 and Super Smash Bros. For Wii U had just 6 months between them on the Wii U during 2013 and 2014, but even then you can see a clear spacing out of their biggest hitters, and in the framework that even by 2013 Wii U had all the makings of a bit of a disaster for the company, and so they had every reason to try to expedite the release of these titles. In general, if Nintendo had a major holiday 2026 title, I would expect there to be a title in summer 2026 and summer 2027 for which they have high but not quite so stratospheric expectations. We probably even know what that game may be. Splatoon Raiders would make a perfect big summer game and is one of their major but not quite stratospheric selling franchises, though of course we should exert some caution that we can't know for sure that it's even 2026 bound. We also know that Fire Emblem, barring delays, often has done well in the past, targeting the summer, May to July period, while Tomodachi Life fits the profile of casual-focused titles like Switch Sports, Everybody Want to Switch, Clubhouse Games, and indeed Miitopia, releasing either in late April or during May. Then we have Yoshi, which, if good feel are involved, would potentially fit as the end of March game, just as Crafted World and Princess Peach Showtime were, although I could easily see it moving around if it's not quite ready, especially given that Good Feel only released Showtime and Bakaru a couple of years ago. My hunch, though, is that Good Feel may have particular reasons related to their own cash flow to have a game released prior to the end of the financial year, and although the Mario movie slightly warps normal considerations, on balance it would make sense for a game targeting very young players to be available, just as many of those people are trotting off to a Mario cinematic event. There's also Duskbloods, which could slip, but otherwise would probably be a good shout for either July ahead of the Japanese spooky season of Obon, or October-November. This means that we already have a very dense 2026 lineup already. January is Animal Crossing New Horizons Nintendo Switch 2 edition in the slot usually reserved for an original January game, but none has been announced, and it's curiously late on for a quick drop. Mario has Center Court in February for Mario Tennis Fever, which strides the middle of the month. A Nintendo Direct Shadow Drop is more plausible for February, but they won't want to scoop their big Mario title too much, so I would moderate my expectations here as well. March is Pocopia at the start of the month, and I would expect something else at the end of it, probably Yoshi. April doesn't always have a game, but something of the scale of Rhythm Heaven would fit. The last Mario movie coincided with the release of Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. May would fit Tomodachi Life. June would fit Super Mario Wonder's Nintendo Switch 2 edition, plus probably another game. Splatoon Raiders would make sense if it is indeed done. July would replicate Three Houses' success in that slot, and they could conceivably skip an August game or do a smaller title, another Nintendo Switch 2 edition perhaps. There's likely to be 4 or perhaps 5 titles in September to December's window, of which the biggest will surely be 3D Mario and Pokemon Gen 10, although Pokemon Champions would also be expected to slot in here somewhere if it isn't delayed, although it could also be, of course, in the April to June window. Now, some of these assumptions may be wrong, especially in the specific sequencing, and even if I'd nailed their intent, games get delayed and things happen, so Nintendo's own plans may shift before we get too far into the year. But even so, there's not really very much space left for new announcements besides Mario and Pokemon, which of course will be utterly huge. Still, from all of this, what I conclude is that there's not an awful lot of leeway for very major new reveals at the beginning of the year, unless Nintendo want to tease stuff far further ahead than they have tended to do in recent times, with the exception of the many 2026 teases for the original Switch in March of 2025, and I think in that case they just wanted to settle people's minds that the original Switch would continue to be supported as a backup plan for if the Switch 2 struggled out of the gate. It seems likely that there will be another game in the January to March quarter, even if it's just a shadow drop. I also expect more Nintendo Switch 2 editions to follow throughout the year, but the leeway here for major new announcements is decidedly limited in 2026. If they want to give sales a nudge, they may do a bigger reveal early, but with the movie on the horizon, I'm not sure that they will feel the need, and they may decide that they're better off just doubling down and waiting it out for the big movie hype wave. Of course, if a major Mario game were coming in October, it might make some sense to trail it before a movie in April. But I suspect it would be better still to trail all the many smaller games they want to sell and then reveal a major movie as a grace note to the hype window of the film in June. It's also conceivable that Nintendo could avoid having two directs, but I think they really need a February direct to finalize dates past Pocopia, so that doesn't really work out, and I think they will have not just a February but also a June direct, as well most likely as a September direct for the first time for a number of years. Clearly, Pokemon Gen 10 is best launched with the 30th anniversary Pokemon Day presentation, so what do they actually have for an early February reveal? My guess is that the focus will be on downloadable content as well as Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, Splatoon Raiders, Tomodachi Life including a Nintendo Switch 2 edition, Yoshi, and Rhythm Heaven. In terms of new content, I'll cycle back to that in a separate video, deeper diving the producers and teams who seem likely to have games targeting this particular period. Now, it's quite possible that Nintendo could decide that they need to juice their February announcements with something long term, but again, I'm skeptical as to what. Zelda stuff I think they'll want to keep for September. And for the same reason, they won't want to promote a big 3D Mario before the film. I doubt they'll want to push Mario Maker or other content as well. Indeed, while June is usually a sure bet for a Mario title, and I do think Super Mario Bros. Wonder is a good call for this slot, I suspect they may replicate their 2023 strategy and skip a big June Mario title. I don't think Animal Crossing will have any big announcements either, and while it's possible they could make an announcement for Metroid or Donkey Kong, they may want Prime 4 and Bonanza to have a bit more time to themselves first. I'm just not sure a 2027 announcement is going to be all that valuable to them this February. So in a subsequent video, I'll be cycling back to specific titles, but let's just pause and do a bit of forecasting. This is where I tried to put a percentage estimate of likelihood for posterity. My accuracy on the channel until now is shown on the screen from my end of 2025 roundup. I don't normally do such big numbers of predictions, but there's a lot to get through, so let's start with the safest calls, where I'm shooting for an average accuracy of 90% and work down to the longer shots, where I'm shooting for an accuracy of 70%, 50%, 30%, and 10%. Okay, 90%. Mario Tennis Fever and Pocopia will hold their dates as already stated for February and March. I also think Pokemon Gen 10 will release in 2026 without delay. I also believe that there will be a Mario Universe game this October. There's another Nintendo Switch 2 edition announced this year, is also a 90% shout to me. The 70% shouts. Fire Emblem will release by the end of September 2026. Tomodachi Life will release between March and September inclusive. A 3D Mario game of some description releases in the holiday quarter. Duskbloods releases in 2026. Splatoon Raiders releases in 2026. There's a direct in February or March. There will be an April game probably released on the 30th of April. There's a game released on the 19th or 26th of March, probably the 26th. The playtest game will release in 2026, and I also believe there will be an August game, probably on the 27th of August. 50% calls. Tomodachi Life releases either the 30th of April or during May. 50% also, I think, Fire Emblem releases between May and July inclusive. 50% I think Splatoon Raiders releases between March and September inclusive. 50% Yoshi will release in March. 50% I also think Pokemon Gen 10 will release on the 19th of November. 50% there will be another title announced for the January to March quarter, including Shadow Drops. 50% there are general directs in February, June, and September. 30% there will be a 3D Mario on either the 8th or the 15th of October, both dates with a long history for Mario releases. 30% Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave will release in July 2026. 30% there will be more than 3 original first-party titles announced in February. 30% Super Mario Bros. Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 Edition will release in June. 30% there will be a February shadow-dropped game. 30% Yoshi will release on the 26th of March 2026 specifically. 10% Pokemon Champions is delayed past April 2027. 10% Tomodachi Life releases on the 14th or the 21st of May. 10% Super Mario Bros. Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 Edition releases on the 4th or the 11th of June. Now that might seem like an oddly specific one, but my thinking is they normally have a big June game at the end of the month, which makes sense for Super Mario Bros. Wonder to be the early June title. At any rate, that's it for now. Next up, I'll be focusing on the more exciting possibilities of what new games we could see in the year ahead. Thanks for watching as ever. Do check out the Patreon if you'd like to support the channel, but otherwise, I'll see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.